𝘗𝑗 is a member of the 𝘗𝑰𝑗𝑒𝑒 and was first introduced in chapter 978. In terms of appearance, we can describe him as a very tall man, lean yet well-toned, with particularly long legs and a light complexion. Most notably, 𝘗𝑗 has very long and flowing pink hair. For the next 34 chapters or so, 𝘗𝑗's appearances, in comparison to the other members of the 𝘗𝑰𝑗𝑒𝑒, have been the most limiting. To put it into perspective, these are all the chapters that 𝘗𝑗 has appeared in so far. Feel free to pause the video and let me know if I missed anything. Before I begin with my theory, we need to disseminate factors that may or may not help us determine the identity. Throughout the video, I will be jumping a bit back and forth for 𝘗𝑗 because this is a rather complicated subject. I've taken the liberty of adding some timestamps and I'll try to guide you through this rabbit hole. So without further ado, let's delve in. When 𝘗𝑗 was first revealed, the community made assumptions that his true identity were based on the likes of Jin or Dawn Krieg. Consequently, this later extended towards rather bizarre options such as Kuro. Remember him? At one point, he was even accused of being the Dawn's son. I believe for the Dawn's case, it's actually more of a joke from Oda. Sure, they have matching mouths, the cigarette, the earrings, the quotes about screeching brats are all very much the Dawn-like, but it is not a serious prediction. The Dawn fits everything except for the facial and body structure. 𝘗𝑗 is not even built like her. So what plot purpose would it serve if they were related? There's also the other guy who people occasionally try to point fingers at. This is Rear Admiral 𝑘'dar. He's a character who was only seen once in the Fisher Tiger flashback, precisely 15 years before the present story. 𝑘'dar is an interesting person because he's one of the most pathetic and cowardly high-ranking Marines I have ever seen. Clearly not suited for fighting against fishmen in the Grand Line. Did he climb the ranks simply because of connections? Through bribery or corrupt methods? I mean, we have actual rats, sure, but they're not rear admirals or other high-ranking individuals. At most, the corrupt Marines usually sit comfortably at around captain. Anyways, the reason people try to use 𝑘'dar as speculation is because of the matching lips and technically seeing Jinbei at a time. However, 𝑘'dar would have to be at most 23 years old back then in order to match the current age of 𝘗𝑗, and I'm not really sure that's the case, given the fact that we have a younger picture of him. In addition, Jinbei was not a warlord when the Sun Pirates attacked 𝑘'dar's ship, so 𝘗𝑗's statement cannot be relevant for him in that regard. Therefore, I believe Oda just gave 𝘗𝑗 some type of connection to Jinbei in order to make it feel more personal for him during this conflict, because Jinbei is a character who just joined the fight and has no current connection towards Wano, towards the Scabbards or the Beast Pirates, so adding some personal stakes for his 1v1 fight seems like a good move. There may not be much more than that. The Torino Kingdom is an island in the South Blue that some call the Isle of Treasure. This is where Chopper was sent during the events of the Sabaody Archipelago arc, and he spent 2 years here in order to train. I'm bringing this place up because there's a possibility that 𝘗𝑗 may harbor a connection with the tribe. Likewise, this group has been notoriously speculated to be the Three-Eyed Tribe since all the people with the tattoo have their faces covered. We also see these eyes several times during Onigashima, including Bao Huang, who seemingly possesses some sort of a hive mind power. Not to mention, this group could be his former or even current crewmates. They pretty much have matching lips. It could be the symbol for the voice of all things, since the Three-Eyed Tribe naturally have it. Or it's a symbol of medicine, meaning 𝘗𝑗 is a doctor. If that is true, it definitely adds more context to his relationship with Queen, who specializes in creating poison and biological weapons. But other than that, I'm not too sure. Let's put some other things into perspective. Going back to the introduction, one could look at the demeanor of 𝘗𝑗 and interpret that he's a bit older than the rest, which translates towards possessing more experience and perception of the world. This was later confirmed in SBS Volume 97 that 𝘗𝑗 is 38 years old, making him not only the oldest member of the Flying Six, but also putting him in the brackets of members such as Shanks, Buggy, Blackbeard, and other such figures, who are close to his age range. When we consider the Jinbei interaction panel, he became a warlord of the sea sometime between 11 years ago and before the time skip, also more weight for why it's not 𝑘'dar. Moreover, the height of 𝘗𝘓 is 336 centimeters or 11 feet, and combined with what I just told you about the age, completely destroys the previous identities mentioned. It especially destroys the theory of 𝘗𝘓 being Jin or Dong Krieg, simply due to their age and height differences. With all of this in mind, it is not surprising that 𝘗𝘓 has become the most mysterious of the Flying Six members. A while back, I made a video discussing about Black Maria and drew connections between Japanese mythology, her possible devil fruit, and matchups. I also made another video regarding Sasaki, and both theories have come out to be true. Now it's time to put the eggs in the basket and determine whether this theory will age well or not. While there is no doubt that Oda will eventually reveal the identity of 𝘗𝘓, when it will happen is not really that easy to predict. I personally believe the identity should be revealed near the end of the battle, rather than for instance the next chapter or two. I'm only saying this in terms of the shock value, rather than following a narrative. And the only way I really see his identity being revealed is provided that his helmet is either damaged or broken entirely during the fight with Jinbei. Can 𝘗𝘓 be a completely new character? Yes, I'm not going to deny that whatsoever, and honestly it could be for the best. However, let's talk about a likely candidate that some of you may or may not know, who has been sitting in the background around the community for a while. Meet 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘐, a prisoner who was locked in level 6 of Impel Down. He's a tan-skinned, muscular man with a point nose, a slightly protruding brow, and a sharp jaw. He also has a large scar on his right cheek, a fish-shaped tattoo on his forehead above the right eye, and his right arm is also covered in tattoos. Please pay attention to a crucial part. Whilst the anime showcases 𝘭𝘭𝘭 with silver earrings, the manga showcases it as gold. The deal breaker is that 𝘗𝘓 also wears golden earrings, and there aren't that many male characters or pirates for that matter who actually wear those. Now I could also draw a rather forced parallel between the fish-shaped tattoos of the prisoner and the nature of 𝘗𝘓's cap-themed crew, aside from the devil fruits of course. At the same time, there isn't much of a correlation because characters such as the Beetle Gifter also have those tattoos despite the ability at hand. And that's where it brings me to the next point. What exactly are the holes of this theory? Well, first of all, we have the whole facial appearance. How exactly am I supposed to ignore the scar on his right cheek, or the tattoos covering his right arm which I just mentioned earlier? Not only does 𝘗𝘓 not possess any of these that we know of, or we can see that is, but his helmet doesn't cover the entire area either. Conversely, is it that believable that he grew the long mane of hair back in a span of only 2 years? While it is One Piece, and really anything can happen, I would like to know if there's an explanation. Perhaps Oda has simply reworked the design. Maybe when the mask is taken off, you can see some of the tattoos and the scar on the right cheek, but when you have the helmet on, then that's not really going to be the case, right? 𝘍𝘰's introduction and story was done a long time ago, over 11 years, so essentially you can view me as making a hot take just because I happen to bring up a rather obscure character. However, there is a certainty, as I just mentioned, that Oda might conduct this minor retcon in terms of design for the character, as that is actually not anything new in such a long-running series as this one. I can also try to defend this hole by using the 𝘗𝘰𝘯𝘪 argument of how facial features can change under extreme emotional distress or other such situations. I don't think 𝘗𝘓 shared what Denjiro went through, but I can definitely attest that he willingly changed his appearance in order to suit his own agenda. Before I continue with this prisoner plotline, I want to quickly inform you about an observation made on the 𝘍𝘰𝘯𝘪 in relation to 𝘗𝘓. We know they consist of the 6 strongest headliners in the Beast Pirates, and Kaido appears to be very proud of them. Likewise, the 𝘍𝘰𝘯𝘪 seem to have the utmost respect for the captain. For example, Ulti is not afraid of criticizing Kaido's familial issues, much to the shock of her companions, but otherwise genuinely thinks that her boss will eventually become Pirate King, enough to become massively angered towards anyone who dares to dispute that claim. Sasaki shows interest in socializing solely with Kaido, looking down on those in the lower ranks. Black Maria acts in a flirtatious way towards her captain and appears to enjoy his company. And then there's Drake, of course, but I'm not going to talk about him because we all know what Drake is up to. 𝘗𝘓 is able to make casual small talk with his fellow 𝘍𝘰𝘯𝘪, but other than that, he views all 5 of them as rivals sharing his rank climbing ambition, and especially towards Sasaki. On the other hand, the youngest of the 𝘍𝘰𝘯𝘪, in this case Ulti and Page 1, are considered to be brats, and therefore viewed as squabbling annoyances in his point of view. This also extends towards the new generation as well, where he views them as mere rats, likely due to the generational differences. Other than that, Who's Who showcases a calm and serious disposition. If we arrive at Who's Who in the regards of how he treats his fellow 𝘉𝘁𝘍𝘍 and the new generation, then we must also ask another question. Why would he join Kaido's crew? What's in it for him? Well, of all the emperors we've seen, Kaido values strength the most and follows a system of fear and meritocracy in his crew. Befitting the name of Animal Kingdom pirates, it only makes sense that the strongest rise to the top. Kaido is also determined to build his crew into the strongest army of Devil Fruit users, ready for what he's declared to be the biggest all-out war against the world government and the entire world. So as a result, he will actively seek out strong and formidable manpower in the new world to draft into his ranks. And these could be anyone, from pirates such as the supernova of the worst generation to individuals like Shutenmaru. As we all know too well, those who resist or defy his attempts are often sent to slave away at the mines of Udon, until they either die or their spirits break and submit to Kaido. But unlike the other members of the crew, I believe Who's Who joined willingly, seeking it as a place of opportunity to bolster his reputation and power. If we go by the prisoner background, then we have no idea how long he's rotted in Impel Down, and a man such as himself would certainly be eager to delve back into his career field. Who's Who used to be a pirate captain, but I believe his career originally ended when he got captured after a disastrous series of events, likely when experiencing a defeat, and was subsequently put in Impel Down. Due to his previous actions and infamous reputation at the time, Who's Who would have been automatically assigned towards level 6 in order to rot and effectively be erased from history. After breaking out alongside the other level 6 prisoners following the events of Blackbeard, he was alone, but he regained ambition, and subsequently he could go back to the new world and has decided to join Kaido's crew. Cats are known to have a somewhat sly nature, which is what Who's Who and his crew are based on, and therefore it gives additional weight towards Who's Who being presented as an opportunist. And let's also not forget this one panel. As Crocodile once said, there are no shortages of silver medalists shedding tears, just because they couldn't overcome Whitebeard and Roger. Who's Who may have been one of those individuals as well. There's also something else I find to be rather concerning, and that's Who's Who's insistence on hiding his identity. Not to mention, there's also the fact that he may be conscious of his past and does not want that to be brought to light. In that fashion, he may have wanted to join Kaido's crew to also stay in a comfortable position, but at the same time, climb up the ranks if so desired with this new persona that he created. By joining the crew and working his way up, Who's Who will be granted with a denomination befitting of a Karthi, just like his respective members, and this is just icing on the cake for a person looking to keep themselves discreet. Who's Who did mention that he saw Jinbei at some point during his career as a warlord, and if we tie this towards the backstory, then maybe Who's Who saw Jinbei simply during his small tenure in Impel Down. Jinbei was actually still a warlord and not stripped of the rank yet, so technically it could be as simple as that. Also keep in mind, if we assume he was a level 6 prisoner, then he must have had enough strength and skill to be able to climb the ranks quickly, more or less. Similarly to Drake, the two may have joined right before the time skip occurred, albeit at possible gaps. It is also possible, though I don't really believe this will come true, that Who's Who is the Drake equivalent of an agent placed into Kaido's crew to keep tabs and possibly prepare the world government for what is to come. If Drake being a marine disguised as a pirate is one thing, then we can automatically conduct a parallel where Who's Who is a Cypher Pulp agent disguised as a pirate. And that's rather interesting when you think about it. This can open up some new plot lines where we can have clashes of interest and competition between Special Unit Sword and its rival, so to speak. I would very much want to see something like that at this stage of the story. On a surface level, you have seen a similarity between the prisoner and Who's Who in terms of appearance, but I hope now that the theory looks a little bit more believable with the backstory I created. So there you have it. As anticlimactic as it may seem, 𝘗𝘓 can still very much just be a new character, or he could have existed in the background and was then conveniently placed into the story. I really do want to commend Oda for introducing someone who we still don't really have any leads on. Maybe it truly is better this way. The fact that 𝘗𝘓 is simply a new person possessing a probable one-off encounter with Jinbei in the past. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you think and your theory on the identity behind 𝘗𝘓. Is he a pre-existing individual or an entirely new character? I'd very much do await your feedback. Until next time, peace.